Hello, my dear viewers. I wish you pleasant viewing and a wonderful day. I also look forward to your feedback in the comments. You know what no one tells you when you're sweating over your final thesis in international relations? That sometimes the diploma ends up framed on a wall behind a receptionist's desk. That was me, Bridget Halloran, class of 2019, University of Chicago, top of my class, minor in conflict resolution, major in negotiating peace. Except I couldn't even negotiate an interview that didn't end in, "You're just not what we're looking for." After months of job hunting and surviving off canned soup and caffeine, I took the only thing that paid rent, a secretary role at Foreman and Dunn, a mid-sized consulting firm known more for its cold brew station than its corporate culture. I told myself it was temporary, just until I got my foot in the door. But months turned into a year, and I became the friendly voice that answered phones, booked meetings, and occasionally unclogged the coffee machine. The thing is, in between all that, I learned something no classroom ever taught me. Power doesn't always come from the corner office. Foreman and Dunn had clients in real estate, tech, and even international trade. Fancy, right? But the real fancy part was how often the execs couldn't answer basic questions from clients without looping me in. At first, it was just small things. "Bridget, what time did Mr. Lang arrive last quarter?" Or, "Could you confirm the names of the stakeholders in the Prague deal?" But then it got bigger. Mr. Turgenev from the Eurasian investment firm only spoke to me when he called. "Bridget," he'd say in that deep, careful tone, "I prefer your updates. They're more contextual." I knew what he meant. I didn't just regurgitate numbers. I explained them. I linked them to EU policy shifts or market sentiments, but none of the partners noticed. Or maybe they just didn't want to admit it. They thought I was just the secretary. It was a strange double life. In the mornings, I fetched coffee for my boss, Richard Marlowe, a man who thought having two phones made him important. In the afternoons, I was essentially managing foreign accounts, prepping briefs that the associates parroted in client calls. Still, my name never appeared on those briefs. And when the firm landed a lucrative contract with a renewable energy group from Scandinavia, it was Marlowe who got the praise. "Nice work pulling that together," he said, as if he hadn't spent the week golfing. "Glad to help," I replied with a smile. Because that's what secretaries do. We smile. But that folder? The one I eventually took with me when I left? It wasn't just a folder. It was a quiet ledger of who really did what. Call transcripts, project notes, financial impact summaries, all organized, cross-referenced, and dated. Not because I was plotting anything, but because if no one else was going to recognize my work, I needed to. And the day everything changed, the day a new boss walked in and told me, "Your position is no longer relevant. Go away." That folder became the most important thing I ever carried. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That part comes later. First, let me tell you what it feels like to be dismissed by someone who hasn't read a single file you built, hasn't spoken to a single client you've retained, hasn't realized he's sitting on a ship held together by your unseen work. Let me tell you what it feels like to smile back, nod once, and pick up a folder that can burn the whole illusion down. People think being a secretary means answering phones and organizing lunches. They don't realize you can run an empire from behind a desk, with a cracked keyboard, and a drawer full of post-it notes. That was me, Bridget Lane, chief of nothing, secretary to everyone. Before Daniel Croft showed up, my day began like a silent dance. I'd be in the office by 7:52, never 7:50, never 8:00. I unlocked the glass doors, turned off the alarm, booted up the computers, and straightened the stack of inbound contracts on the assistant director's desk. The coffee pot would be warming up just as the elevator doors chimed at 8:03, and someone would ask, "Oh, Bridget, you're already here?" Of course I was. At 8:15, I logged into our scheduling system and cross-checked global meeting times, taking into account local holidays in the Middle East, French labor strikes, and daylight saving confusion in the UK. By 9 I'd have sent out a revised schedule to at least 3 departments. No one asked me to. I just knew who always forgot which time zone their clients were in. I wasn't technically on the operations team, or the legal team, or client relations, but I quietly supported all three. A typical Tuesday might involve chasing down a missing invoice from our offshore vendor, proofreading a Russian translation for a white paper someone left half-finished, smoothing over a miscommunication between our German office and a high-profile logistics partner who had threatened to pull their contract. That one required finesse, and a late-night Zoom call in German, which I speak fluently. Another thing no one at the company knew. I wasn't just a secretary, I was a pressure valve, a human buffer. When systems failed, people called IT. When relationships failed, they called me. But everything changed the day he arrived. Daniel Croft. Tall, confident, and disturbingly efficient. He stepped off the elevator on a rainy Monday like he owned the building. And maybe he did. Rumor was corporate had brought him in to clean house. He had a background in military logistics, an MBA from somewhere with marble staircases, and a reputation for optimizing failing departments. No one said it, but we all knew. Optimize meant eliminate. I met him at reception, as I'd met every new executive. Extended a hand, offered a welcome packet I'd customized just that morning. He barely glanced at it. "Where's operations?" he asked, like I was a kiosk. "Sixth floor. I can walk you up." "I have the layout," he said, already striding toward the elevator. No handshake, no thank you, no acknowledgement. Just a man in an expensive coat brushing past like I was furniture. That was my first warning. The second came on Wednesday, when he held a team realignment meeting. Everyone in the operations wing was summoned to conference room A. I wasn't invited, but I printed the materials, arranged the chairs, and made sure the projector was working. I stood outside listening. He spoke in short, clipped sentences. "We're cutting inefficiency, lean structure, no sentimentality." A few chuckled awkwardly. He didn't. "Everyone will submit a weekly task report starting Monday. If your value isn't visible, don't expect to stay." Visible. That word stayed with me. Because nothing I did was visible, not officially. That afternoon, my desk was moved. No one told me. I came back from lunch to find my things boxed up. Someone else's hand had done the boxing, badly, and my desk relocated to a forgotten corner near the janitor's closet. "Temporary reallocation," Bree, Daniel's new junior assistant, chirped. She was barely out of college. Pretty, polished, uncluttered in every way. Daniel's favorite word was streamlined. Bree was the human version. That Friday, she scheduled a meeting on the Chinese national holiday. 3 executives missed the call. One client nearly terminated their agreement. I fixed it, called the client, smoothed it over in Mandarin, and rescheduled the meeting for the next week. Bree never found out. Neither did Daniel. The next week, I sent Daniel a revised international calendar with all statutory holidays cross-referenced by client. He didn't respond. But 2 days later, Bree circulated a similar document in a different font. He praised her for being proactive. I started noticing things. My calendar access was revoked. My credentials for the document server were changed. Memos I used to review now came to me already printed via Bree's desk. She even started sending out client call summaries. Bad ones. Missing context. Misquoting names. I corrected one, quietly, after Mr. Kawamura from Japan called me, Me, to clarify why the summary said they were canceling their contract. They weren't. I asked myself more than once if I had made a mistake, if I'd offended Daniel without knowing, if I'd failed to show the visible value he kept talking about. But then came the client from Buenos Aires. He refused to speak to anyone else. "I'll wait until Bridget is on the line," he said during a conference call. "She knows our business. The rest of you don't." Daniel was on that call. He said nothing. But after that day, my client interactions were cut off completely. All communications were rerouted. The walls were closing in. I became the office phantom. Bree sat at the desk I used to work from, beneath the framed print I'd picked out 2 years ago during the renovation. She didn't know the copier required a manual reboot every 72 hours. She didn't know where the spare router was hidden, Or that the CEO's wife preferred her lunch order faxed, not emailed every Wednesday. I watched the slow unraveling, small things, quiet things, invisible to anyone who wasn't paying attention, but I was always paying attention. And every misstep, every correction I made from the shadows, every slight, I documented. In the folder. Because I didn't understand why Daniel Croft had chosen me for exile, but I knew better than to confront him without a plan. You don't argue with someone who sees you as a threat. You outlast them, and if necessary, you destroy them. The email hit my inbox at 9:13 a.m. Subject: Please see me at 9:30, D. Croft. No greeting, no punctuation beyond the period. Just a summons from the man who hadn't looked me in the eye since his first day. I stared at the message for a long moment, heart steady. I'd seen enough of Daniel Croft's tactics over the past few weeks to know that please was just corporate camouflage. This wasn't a request. It was a controlled detonation. I stood, straightened the hem of my blazer, and picked up my folder. The same navy one I'd kept close since the beginning. I had added more to it lately. Notes, dates, discrepancies. Little things, invisible things. Things only I would know were missing. When I knocked on his glass office door, he didn't look up, just waved me in like he was shooing away a waitress at a steakhouse. "Bridget," he said as I stepped inside. "Sit." I didn't sit. He finally glanced up, eyes flicking to the folder in my hand, then dismissing it immediately. "I've been reviewing departmental structure," he began, in that sterile MBA-certified tone that was starting to make my skin itch. "Processes, personnel redundancies, long-term efficiency strategies. You understand." I didn't respond. He turned his monitor toward me, revealing a clean, colorful dashboard. Charts, graphs, flow maps, data everywhere. "I built a new client interface," he said, clearly pleased with himself. "Clients can schedule meetings, submit queries, track project progress, all through a centralized portal." He tapped a few keys, and the screen changed to a mock-up. It was sleek, cold, clinical. No more back-and-forth emails, no last-minute phone calls, everything pre-approved, structured. Then another tab. A client management system. He scrolled through it like a magician revealing a trick. "We've uploaded all historical data, call logs, contract details, preferred communication times, even their birthdays. It's all here. Categorized, searchable." "Impressive," I said flatly. "I thought so too." He smiled, and something about the way his lips pulled taut made me think he'd practiced that expression in a mirror. He leaned back. "You see, this is the future, Bridget. Human-led client management is inefficient. Emotional labor? It's a liability. Computers don't forget. Computers don't get tired, or take sick days, or hold grudges." "So you've built a robot to replace a conversation?" He blinked briefly. "I've built a system," he corrected, "and that system does what you did. But better, faster, and more transparently. Clients don't need someone to handhold them. They need consistency." I crossed my arms loosely. "Is that what they told you?" He smiled again, wider this time. "They don't need to tell me. The data says it." That's when I understood. He wasn't just replacing me. He genuinely believed he'd already succeeded. He thought the archive of emails and contact fields in his database captured everything I had ever done. As if client loyalty could be quantified into a drop-down menu. "Bridget," he said, folding his hands, "your role is, frankly, an artifact. It's been obsolete for a long time. We're streamlining the department, automating what's automatable. You'll receive a formal termination letter today." And there it was. No warning, no attempt at performance feedback. Just, "You're unnecessary now. Goodbye." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why he never spoke to the clients before making this decision, because I already knew what he would say. He didn't have to. The arrogance in the room was thick enough to choke on. "I see," I said. "You've been fine," he added. already typing something into his keyboard. But the system works without you. You've been replaced by infrastructure. And frankly, you should have seen this coming. You never evolved beyond being a glorified call scheduler. My fingers tightened around the folder. He didn't know about the Kazakh oil deal I saved last fall by negotiating with a liaison who refused to speak English. He didn't know I'd rewritten a proposal at midnight when our lead strategist messed up the translation and nearly insulted a client's national pride. He didn't know that when Mrs. DuPont's husband passed away, I'd sent flowers and adjusted her company's invoice schedule without being asked, and that she'd called me sobbing 2 weeks later, thanking me for the only moment of kindness she'd received from anyone in our entire company. He thought data points told the whole story. He thought history in a database meant he understood the future. But what he had was numbers. What I had was people. I gave a small smile, my real one, the one I only used when I was done pretending. "Well," I said, "if that's your final decision, I'll go clear my things." Daniel shrugged. "There's not much to clear, is there?" Just the folder. Just everything he thought he already knew. As I turned to leave, he laughed under his breath. "I hope that folder helps you find a new job." I didn't look back, because I already knew. It was going to do a lot more than that. It was raining when I got fired. The kind of rain that made the windows blur like the whole city was quietly watching behind a veil. I stood at my desk, a desk that was no longer mine, methodically placing a few things into a cardboard box provided by HR. A mug that said, "Diplomacy, the art of saying no politely." A tin of Earl Grey I kept for late afternoons. A pen with my name engraved on it. A graduation gift I bought for myself. And the navy blue folder. I hesitated as I picked it up, running my fingers along the worn edge. Its corners had curled from being opened and closed so many times over the past 3 years. The weight of it wasn't physical, it was emotional, historical, tactical. Inside was everything that didn't exist in the CRM Daniel so proudly worshipped. Everything he didn't know he was about to lose. I heard him before I saw him. His voice was always a half octave louder than necessary, announcing itself as if the sound alone carried authority. He strolled toward me with that unearned confidence of someone who's never had to fix the things he breaks. "So," he said, watching me gently close the box, "you're all packed." I didn't answer, just adjusted the folder so it wouldn't bend at the edges. He chuckled, and I could feel the smirk radiating off him. I have to say, I didn't expect it to go this smoothly. No scene, no fuss. That's rare. I looked up at him then. Really looked. Crisp suit, perfect haircut, expensive watch. All polished surfaces. Nothing beneath. "I've always believed in clean exits," I said simply. Daniel leaned against the nearest cubicle wall, arms crossed. "You know," he said, as if we were old colleagues sharing drinks, "the system's working beautifully. Clients are scheduling themselves. Communications streamlined. No more middle steps." I almost laughed. Middle steps. That's what he thought I was. "Is that so?" I said, calm as ever. He nodded, grinning now. "Everything we need is in the database. Emails, contact history, birthdays, preferences. We even have keyword tags now. Artificial intelligence pulls client sentiment metrics from their messages. We can predict when they're getting frustrated before they even say it." "Sounds very efficient." He gave a mock bow. "Exactly. And without the need for a human filter. Honestly, Bridget, you should be grateful. You've been replaced by progress. Seamlessly." He thought this was kindness, or maybe magnanimity. Then his eyes drifted to the folder in my box. "What's that?" I didn't answer. He tilted his head, still smiling, like he thought this was a joke. "I hope that folder helps you find a new job." That was the moment. The one that stayed with me. The casual cruelty in his voice. Not rage, not venom. Just disregard. Like he truly believed I was irrelevant now. He had no idea what he'd just done. Because that folder didn't contain spreadsheets or appointment logs or client ID numbers. It contained relationships. Real ones. I had built a quiet empire in the margins of this company. And I'd done it without applause, without recognition, without needing my name in any CRM field. Take Mr. Dempsey from North Shore Biotech. His assistant once told me he had an obsession with butterscotch candies, so every quarterly care package I assembled included a bag, tucked between reports and branded pens. He never mentioned it in meetings, but I knew. And every time we renewed, he made a point to say, "Bridget, you remember people." Or Sophia Costa from Lisbon. We once bonded over a shared hatred of slide decks and a love of street photography. I remembered her son's name. I remembered her dog's surgery. She once told me, "I've never trusted a business more, and it's because you make it feel personal." None of that went into the CRM, because it couldn't be tagged, because humans aren't just entries on a screen. What Daniel never understood, what he couldn't understand, is that data can replicate what people do, but it can't replicate why they matter. I stood there for a moment, watching his face, wondering how long it would take for him to realize that the people who made this company profitable weren't tied to account numbers. They were tied to me. He thought his system could recreate that loyalty. He thought pasting a birthday into a calendar or using AI to predict email tone was enough. He thought clients stayed because of the company, but they stayed because I made them feel seen. Because when their emails got lost, I called. When they missed a meeting, I didn't penalize. I rearranged. I caught mistakes before they hit their desks. I reminded them of things they didn't know they needed. I earned their trust, one quiet detail at a time. And now I was walking out the door. With the folder. With the only map to the emotional architecture of this company. The database didn't know that Mrs. Al-Masri responded faster if you wrote "Hope you're well" in the subject line, or that Rafael from Mexico City refused to work with anyone who mispronounced his daughter's name. The system didn't know what I knew, and Daniel never thought to ask. As I walked past him, box in hand, I said, "Good luck with your AI." He blinked, confused by the sincerity in my voice. He thought I was being bitter, but I wasn't bitter. I was free. Because I knew what came next. The calls, the emails, the slow, dawning realization that the system couldn't hold the weight I carried all these years. That loyalty can't be automated. And that Bridget Lane wasn't just some expendable note-taker. I was the reason the lights were still on. And I'd just taken the blueprint with me. For the first time in years, I woke up without an alarm clock. No early commute, no inbox full of calendar conflicts, no back-to-back meetings that weren't mine to speak in. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, trying to make sense of the silence. It was day one of unemployment. Officially. I didn't know whether to cry, eat an entire bag of pretzels, or start scrolling job boards like some desperate cliché. So I did none of those things. I just stood in the kitchen, clutching a chipped mug and staring at the rain outside as if the answer was going to form in the clouds. The truth was, I didn't have a plan. I didn't even know where to start. All I knew was that I'd left behind a place where I gave everything. My energy, my brain, my heart, my evenings, and sometimes my weekends. And what did I get in return? A cardboard box and a final insult. I told myself it was just a job, but it wasn't. That company had become my world, and I had built something there, something no one else had the eyes to see. Except, maybe, the clients. At 10:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer. The number was international, Paris, I guessed, and for a split second, I assumed it was some automated exit survey nonsense. But curiosity won. "Bridget?" came the voice on the other end. I blinked. "Mrs. DuPont?" "Oui, yes, it's me," she said, her accent sharp and warm all at once. "They told me you are no longer working there. What happened?" I cleared my throat. "It's complicated. They said you were let go, that they replaced you with some system, a website?" She made the word sound like a disease. "Yes, there's a new process now." There was a pause, then the unmistakable sound of a lighter flicking. "I told that Daniel man he was a fool," A flashy, empty fool. I choked out a laugh. No, really. I told him I would not be working with robots. I told him, Bridget is the only one who knows I take 2 sugars in my coffee, not 1. Do you know, he had the nerve to say that information was in my profile? That stopped me cold. He actually said that? Oh, yes, she snapped. And I told him, a profile does not remember the day my husband died. Bridget did. A profile does not send me handwritten notes on my birthday. Bridget did. I was silent. Bridget, she continued, her voice softer now. You were not a secretary. You were a real woman, a real person. And that is rare. My throat tightened. I mumbled something polite and hung up before I broke down crying. But before I could even set the phone down, it rang again. Bridget, it's Albrecht, Zenith Petroleum. Are you okay? I blinked. Yes, I'm fine. How did you? They sent out a message saying you were transitioned out due to automation improvements. He snorted. Translation. They replaced you with a glorified booking widget. I didn't know what to say, so I defaulted to humility. I was just support, Mr. Albrecht. They have all the client information saved. It should be seamless. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, Bridget, stop talking like that. You weren't support. You were the reason I stayed with that company. I didn't care about your proposal templates or your workflows. I cared about you. About how you knew when to call, not just what to say. About how you never treated me like a client. You treated me like a person. I closed my eyes. I don't know what to do now. Figure it out, he said. And when you do, wherever you land, call me. I'll move my account the same day. The call ended, and 2 minutes later, the next one came. Sophia from Lisbon. Then Hiro from Japan. Then Rafael from Mexico City. One by one, voices from every time zone and continent started to echo the same message. We heard. We're sorry. We trusted you. And the most haunting of all, wherever you go, we'll follow. Some of them even asked if I'd started my own company. I laughed at first, nervously, and said I was just a secretary. But then Sophia said something that stuck in my mind all day. You were never just anything. You were it. That night, I sat in bed with the navy blue folder spread out on the comforter. Pages of handwritten notes stared back at me. Details no CRM could track. A favorite tea blend. A daughter's dance recital. The anniversary of a tragic fire that a client refused to talk about, but always struggled with each year around May. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I was starting to understand something I'd never fully let myself believe. I was the real reason this company worked, and Daniel Croft had just handed me the proof. Not because he valued me, but because he didn't. And now, he didn't even realize the power I was holding. Not yet. But he would, if you'd told me 24 hours earlier that I'd be standing in the lobby of one of the biggest competitor firms in the city, wearing old sneakers and holding a coffee-stained folder like it was the crown jewels, I would have laughed. But something had shifted overnight. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. After the client calls started, one after another, their voices cracking with disappointment, frustration, and most of all, loyalty, I realized I wasn't powerless. In fact, I might have more power now than I ever did sitting at that glossy desk under Daniel Croft's cold shadow. So I took a breath, opened my laptop, and started making a list of names. My names. Clients who called me. Clients I supported. Clients who stayed with the company not because of slick branding or quarterly newsletters, but because they trusted me. At the top of the list, Veriton Global, a rival firm. The name had floated around for years, always nipping at our heels, but never quite outpacing us. They had a reputation for being sleek, efficient, and brutally selective. And unlike Daniel's place, they listened. So I didn't send a resume. I didn't draft a polite inquiry. Instead, I wrote a message as bold as I'd ever dared. I'm Bridget Lane. I worked at Corvado Partners until recently, handling direct contact with multiple international clients, accounts you've been pursuing for years. Several have reached out to me independently. They trust me, If you're interested in discussing what that means for Veriton, I'm available today. 11 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Regina Morrow, Veriton's Director of International Strategy. She wanted to meet. Immediately, I looked at myself in the mirror. Wrinkled sweater, faded jeans, my hair half pinned up like I'd rolled out of bed. Which, to be fair, I had. Not exactly executive material, but I grabbed the folder anyway and went. The Veriton offices were everything Corvado's weren't. Sharp lines, soft lighting, a receptionist who didn't glance past me like I was there to deliver lunch. Everything felt still, intentional. No chaos in the air, no ego shouting across the halls. Regina was waiting by the elevator. She was tall, no nonsense, and dressed like someone who could fire a person just by raising an eyebrow. I liked her immediately. We shook hands, and she led me to a glass-walled office with a view of the skyline. It was quiet. Too quiet. "You said clients are willing to follow you," she began. "Not even sitting yet." "They already have," I said. "Not contracts, yet. But intent. Phone calls, emails, the kind of loyalty that doesn't go away when a CRM sends them a birthday message." She sat. I followed. "And you weren't an account manager?" "No. Technically, I was the executive assistant to the VP of operations." Regina raised an eyebrow. "So, the secretary?" "Yes." She leaned back, skeptical. "And they called you?" I opened the folder, slid it across the table, and let it fall open. Page after page. Personal notes, handwritten summaries, preferences, quotes, emotional patterns. A record of trust, relationship by relationship. "Take a look," I said quietly. She did, and her face changed. It wasn't immediate. She flipped through the pages slowly, processing. She saw the details, the ones no system could track. The way Mr. Albrecht always rescheduled if his son had a game. How Sophia Costa responded best to voice notes rather than emails. The exact hour Mrs. DuPont liked to be contacted. After tea, but before her afternoon walks. The small emotional cues I'd used to manage million-dollar contracts without ever signing my name on a dotted line. Regina finally looked up. "You were doing the work of 3 departments," she said. I nodded. Quietly, she tapped the folder. "And Daniel Croft just let you go? He thought a portal and a CRM could replace me." She snorted. "Classic." There was silence for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to the window, arms folded. "I'll be honest," she said. "We've been trying to break into some of these accounts for years. We've had lunches, dinners, half a dozen calls. Nothing sticks." I said nothing. Regina turned back to me. "But you show up in sneakers, with a folder, and they call you. They trust you." I didn't move. "I'm not offering you an assistant job," she said. "I wouldn't take one. I want you in a new role, client development manager. You'll be in charge of strategy and client retention. We'll bring your accounts here and build a model around your approach. You'll work directly under me, and we'll talk salary after the paperwork lands on your desk." My heart was pounding. "I don't even have a resume ready," I whispered. She smiled. "You don't need one. The clients are your resume." I sat there, stunned. I hadn't even had time to change clothes. I hadn't crafted a pitch. I'd simply walked in, carrying the truth. And the truth was enough. She extended her hand again. "You ready?" I blinked. "Now?" "You can start Monday, or later. But just know, we want you here, as soon as you're ready." I walked out of that office in a daze. Into the elevator, through the lobby, onto the wet sidewalk, where the rain had stopped and the clouds were finally thinning. It was still technically my first day off, but somehow I'd just started something new. And for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing a promotion. I was building my own table, and Daniel Croft had no idea what was coming. It started quietly. No fireworks, no dramatic headlines. Just silence. A subtle thinning of the noise. Emails that used to be copied to half the company stopped circulating. Reports that once landed in 10 inboxes at once trickled to 4, then 3. And Daniel Croft, so busy rearranging departments and issuing efficiency mandates, didn't see the rot setting in. Not at first, but I did, because I knew how it would happen. The first week at Veriton Global was a strange, surreal mix of confidence and cautious pacing. Regina, true to her word, gave me freedom. No micromanagement, no performance benchmarks, just a sleek new office, a supportive strategy team, and one instruction: show us what you can do. So I did. I started with outreach, not to steal anyone, but simply to connect. Soft touch points, personal check-ins, no pressure, no proposals, just me. The clients responded like drought-soaked earth soaking up rain. "Bridget, I can't believe you reached out. I didn't know where you landed. I'm so glad to hear from you. They said you'd left, but no one explained why." Each call was a pulse of connection, the kind that Daniel's systems never measured, because they happened in moments that didn't generate data. Casual conversations, offhand remarks, fleeting details like favorite scotches, childhood hometowns, and personal anniversaries. The human things. By the end of week 1, 4 clients had quietly requested preliminary documents to initiate transfers. By the end of week 2, 2 more had followed. Each one left behind a hole in Daniel's dashboard, but he didn't feel it, not yet. Because on spreadsheets, they were just line items. It wasn't until the revenue projections began dipping below forecast that someone must have knocked on his door. Because at 9:14 a.m. on Thursday, my phone rang. Blocked number. But I knew the area code. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello? Bridget?" Even after everything, his voice still had that clipped, dismissive edge, but now it was cracked, like ice starting to fracture under weight. "Daniel, I suppose congratulations are in order. You're working at Veriton." A statement, not a question. He was fishing, testing the waters. "I am. Some of our clients, well, they've been difficult lately. Canceling meetings, delaying sign-offs, pulling back from commitments." "Strange," I said mildly. "It's almost like something changed." He exhaled, loudly. Not frustration, but fear masked in frustration. "Bridget," he said carefully, "I need to ask, are you interfering with our client base?" "Interfering?" I repeated. "You've been contacting them." "No," I corrected him. "They've been contacting me." He went quiet. But I didn't stop. "They're not happy, Daniel. They feel abandoned, ignored. Some of them didn't even get a call when I left. No explanation, no reassurances, just automation. And when they reached out with concerns, your people sent them help desk tickets and calendar links." Silence. "I told you once," I said, "that relationships can't be standardized." More silence. Then, finally, "You were a secretary." I laughed, short and sharp. "Is that what you still think?" "You managed schedules." "I managed people. I remembered birthdays. I knew when not to schedule calls because someone's child was sick. I reminded Mrs. DuPont that her dog had surgery and followed up 2 days later. I knew that Mr. Tanaka's wife passed away 4 years ago and that February is still hard for him." I paused. "Let it land. You think you had all that stored in a database? You didn't even know it existed." He tried again, voice brittle. "We built systems, scalable ones. You were a single point of failure." "No," I said. "You were." There was a long pause. I could feel him unraveling on the other end. Maybe pacing, maybe staring at his dashboard trying to find the hole. "I underestimated you," he finally admitted. "Yes, you did." He exhaled, defeated. "What do you want?" I blinked, genuinely confused. What do I want? Do you want an apology? A settlement? Do you want your job back? The question hung in the air for a second too long. Then I laughed again. This time quieter, steadier. "I'm not calling for anything, Daniel. You called me." He didn't respond. I waited a beat. Do you remember that folder I walked out with? The one you mocked? The one you said might help me find a new job? Still nothing. Well, it did. A beat. And you? You lost everything. Click. The line went dead. I sat there for a moment in the quiet that followed. No gloating, no triumph dance, just a still, steady pulse of satisfaction deep in my chest. I had spent years being underestimated, invisible, a ghost with a smile and a headset. Now, they were scrambling, and I was just getting started. Daniel Croft always believed in numbers, metrics, algorithms, market behavior charts. He built his identity around clean dashboards and quarterly performance graphs. He never believed in people, not really, not beyond what they could produce or how they could be replaced. That's why, in his mind, I was always just a secretary, an extra. So when I walked out of that building with a cardboard box and a navy blue folder, he didn't even watch me leave. He thought it was over, that I would disappear, that someone else, perhaps a bot, or a newer, younger assistant, would sit in my chair the next morning and the clients would carry on without blinking. But that isn't what happened. The first client to leave didn't make a fuss. They just pulled their contract early and cited internal realignment. No one thought much of it, until 2 more followed the next week. Then 3, then 6. And then came the audit. Daniel likely had no idea it was even being conducted at first. These things never start with sirens, just whispers, silent cross-checks, forwarded emails between managing partners, internal reviews of missed revenue targets, and plummeting engagement. And eventually, someone started asking a dangerous question. Why are they leaving? The answers weren't in the CRM, because the CRM only tracked what Daniel considered relevant: billing cycles, average project scope, last contact timestamp. But the real reason they stayed, the loyalty, the trust, the person behind the transaction, was never entered into the system, because I never gave it to them. It was in my folder, and by the time they realized it, the damage was already blooming like ink across a waterlogged page. I wasn't in the room when Daniel finally saw the report, but I've imagined it 100 ways. Maybe he was sitting at his desk, sipping his third espresso of the morning, still telling himself he had it under control. Maybe he still believed that this was just a minor bump, a temporary shakeup. Then he opened the PDF. Subject line: Client Attrition Report. Internal summary: Preliminary findings suggest the primary cause of client loss is not financial, legal, or service-related. The majority of clients interviewed named Bridget Lane as the critical point of contact and their reason for sustained engagement with the firm. Client feedback indicates her departure led to a collapse in personalized service, and her replacement systems failed to meet expectations. Clients have expressed frustration with automated communication and the lack of emotional intelligence in interactions post-departure. But it didn't end there. Attached to the report was something worse: a scan of the folder, every page, organized, annotated, time-stamped, my handwriting on every line, pages of personality insights, soft notes, hints, triggers, careful observations written over years, client by client, the kind of emotional mapping that can't be taught, that can't be Googled. And suddenly, it hit him. This was the infrastructure, not the CRM, not the portal, me. He had destroyed the foundation of his entire client relationship structure and hadn't realized until after it crumbled. That's when the panic set in. I imagine him locking his door, staring at the screen as the scanned pages flipped one by one. Dozens of names he thought he owned, now attached to a face he'd ignored, to a voice he'd fired, to the woman he laughed at. He must have tried to call someone, one of the executives perhaps, or maybe IT, thinking he could retrieve something, salvage the data, rebuild it. But there was no one to call, because the executives had already received the report too. They were meeting without him now, quietly, deliberately, reviewing the scope of the fallout, asking one another not if he should be removed, but how soon. And the worst part? They weren't angry, they were disappointed. Because he didn't lose a client. He lost trust. He didn't fail a quarter. He failed a philosophy. Because Daniel Croft had been hired as a visionary. And now the vision had collapsed into spreadsheets bleeding red numbers. That's when it happened. That's when the full weight of it must have landed on him. That the woman he once dismissed was now the reason contracts were vanishing. That the just a secretary had taken with her the very soul of the business. That's when the tears came. Not the hot, angry kind. The cold, breathless kind. The kind you can't stop once they start. The kind that happen when your ego finally breaks and you're left alone with the mess you made. I imagine him sitting there, surrounded by silence, looking at the scan of the folder, realizing every single note, every anniversary remembered, every favorite drink recalled, every moment of care, was now in someone else's hands. Mine. And worse, those clients hadn't just left. They were loyal to me. He had laughed at that folder. Now it was the sword that had gutted his career. And when the executive board finally called him in, I imagine he already knew it was over. No shouting, no confrontation, just quiet words. We're going in a different direction. And he wouldn't just lose the job, he'd lose his reputation. Because companies talk. And the story would follow him. The man who replaced relationships with a database and lost everything. And as for me, I was building something new, something smarter. And this time, I wasn't writing anything down in a folder. Because this time, I was the company. Some men don't go down quietly, especially men like Daniel Croft. Losing gracefully was never part of his DNA. And after watching the numbers bleed out of his company, clients defect one after another, and his internal influence shrink by the hour. He did what frightened men with titles often do. He decided to make me the villain. It started, as these things often do, with a certified letter delivered to my desk in a pristine envelope that tried too hard to look expensive. The moment I saw the logo on the corner, Corvado Partners Legal, I knew what was inside. Regina and I read it together. She leaned over my desk, eyebrow cocked, espresso in hand. I tried not to laugh as she read aloud. Ms. Lane, we are formally requesting that you cease and desist all contact with clients previously affiliated with Corvado Partners. Your actions constitute a breach of confidentiality, misappropriation of proprietary information, and may result in significant legal consequences. Your conduct has created an unfair competitive advantage through the poaching of clients using intellectual property. Regina rolled her eyes so hard, I thought they might get stuck. Did you steal anything? She asked flatly. You know I didn't. Just checking. I took no digital files, no printed records. Everything I used was either public information or stored in my head. Or in that folder, I said, gesturing toward the familiar navy blue binder, now proudly shelved behind glass in my office like a relic of war. You remembered people, she said, her voice cool and even. You remembered feelings. That's not theft. That's intelligence. And he can't copyright relationships. I nodded, but something in me twisted. Because even though I knew I had done nothing wrong, the tone of the letter still made me clench my jaw. It wasn't just a threat. It was an attempt to scare me into backing off, into shrinking again, into becoming the secretary he always thought I was. But I wasn't her anymore. Veriton's legal department responded within the hour. Their letter, co-signed by Regina herself, was a masterpiece of corporate dismissal. Ms. Lane retained no proprietary data. Her relationships with former clients were personal, not contractually exclusive. Any continued engagement is the result of individual client choice. Translation: good luck proving a feeling in court. But Daniel wasn't finished. He filed a formal complaint with the local Business Ethics Commission, claimed I had undermined trade secrets, implicated me in a breach of fiduciary duty, whatever that was supposed to mean for a former secretary. And when that didn't work, he did something even worse. He tried to smear me in the press. A whisper campaign began showing up in obscure business blogs and industry newsletters. Anonymous, insider sources hinting at a disloyal former employee who manipulated clients emotionally and created turmoil in her wake. He never used my name, but everyone knew. At first, I panicked. Every part of me that had once worried about being too much, or too ambitious, or too emotional came clawing back. What if people believed it? What if it tarnished everything I had worked for? But then, the emails came. From clients. From my people. Raphael sent a one-line message. Let him try. I know who you are. Mrs. DuPont wrote in her perfectly sharp prose. He's confusing emotional intelligence with manipulation, typical of men who've never been truly trusted. And then Hiro Tanaka, never one for many words, sent only this. He has power, you have loyalty, you'll win. The next day, Regina called me into her office. She was leaning against her desk with her phone in hand and a rare smile on her face. We're going to respond, she said. To the letter? To everything. She'd already lined up an interview with a respected industry journalist. And not just a blog. This was a full feature in Global Business Quarterly, a publication known for corporate profiles and deep dives into success stories that shook up industries. Are you comfortable with going public? She asked. I paused, thinking about all I'd endured. The years of being overlooked, the quiet triumphs no one saw, the way I was fired without ceremony, without gratitude, the way Daniel now accused me of theft when all I'd ever stolen was being good at my job. Yes, I said, I'm ready. The article dropped 1 week later. Headline: The Woman Behind the Curtain. How one assistant disrupted an industry by doing her job exceptionally well. Subhead: They fired her for being invisible. Now she's impossible to ignore. There were no theatrics, no smear campaign of my own. Just facts, client testimonials, and one powerful narrative. I didn't take anything from Corvado. They gave it all away when they let me go. Daniel's name appeared in one sentence, described only as a former executive now facing internal review. He must have read the piece. He must have felt the sting of knowing that the only story being told was mine. That his legacy had been reduced to a footnote. That the woman he tried to erase had become a symbol of everything he misunderstood. And that's when it hit him, I imagine. Lawsuits wouldn't fix this. Legal threats couldn't claw back trust. The reputation he once built on performance charts and jargon-heavy presentations was gone. All that was left was the bitter truth. I didn't break the system. He did. And no courtroom in the world could rewrite that. The courthouse didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a hospital waiting room. Clinical, cold, a little too quiet. Like everyone was holding their breath. But make no mistake, this was a war. And Daniel Croft had shown up with lawyers, binders, and a folder full of paperwork meant to prove that I was the reason his company was falling apart. The irony made me smile. Because the truth was, I didn't break Corvado Partners. He did. I just refused to be buried in the rubble. The judge was a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes that said she'd seen too many men like Daniel. Men who wore confidence like armor and used lawsuits to hide their failures. She didn't flinch when his lead attorney launched into their opening statement. They painted a picture of betrayal. They said I'd taken proprietary client data, that I had deliberately poached long-standing accounts, that I had weaponized insider knowledge to benefit a competitor. They even called it sabotage. They had charts, emails, even blurry screenshots of our CRM. They tried to make it sound like every client I'd ever spoken to had been assigned to me with a barcode and a timestamp. And then they brought up the folder, the one Daniel mocked as I carried it out on my last day. They called it unauthorized documentation, claimed it contained sensitive client intelligence, meant only for internal use. I almost laughed. Then it was our turn. My attorney stood slowly, deliberately, and handed the judge a hardbound book, an exact replica of my folder. Inside, page after page of handwriting, notes in blue and purple pen, little arrows and smiley faces in the margins. Abbreviations only I could understand. Personal shorthand, quick doodles. Sometimes whole paragraphs of reflections on conversations I'd had. We called it what it was: a personal journal, not a spreadsheet, not a printed email, not a stolen file, a record of care. Then Regina took the stand. She testified not as my employer, but as a witness to my integrity. She didn't walk in here with stolen data, she said, steady and proud. She walked in with relationships, and those aren't something you can download. Client after client followed with written declarations. Raphael's statement was brief and brutal. She remembered my daughter's birthday and followed up after my wife's surgery. The company didn't even remember my time zone. Mrs. DuPont, eloquent as ever. She knew how to speak to people, not at them. I didn't follow her to a competitor. I followed her to dignity. But it was Hiro Tanaka who delivered the knockout. He appeared via live video, wearing a navy suit with a quiet calm that made everyone lean forward. Daniel Croft had access to our names and invoices. Bridget Lane had access to us. That is not theft. That is trust. The courtroom was silent. Even Daniel's lawyers didn't object. They couldn't, because the truth was standing there, undeniable and breathing. Then came my turn to speak. I hadn't planned on saying much, but when the judge asked if I had a final statement, I stood. I was never trying to take anything, I said quietly. I was let go without warning, told that my work could be replaced by a system. But systems don't remember how Mrs. DuPont takes her tea. They don't hear the silence in a client's voice when they've had a bad week. They don't send sympathy cards. I did those things, not because I was told to, but because it mattered. Because they mattered. I paused. And the folder? That was my memory. My own handwriting. My own thoughts. It wasn't stolen. It was ignored. I sat down. The judge didn't take long. She returned from chambers within 20 minutes. Her voice was clear, and when she looked at Daniel, she didn't blink once. This court finds no evidence of theft or misappropriation of proprietary data. The notes in question are the defendant's personal property. The client movement following her termination is not the result of misconduct, but of loyalty that was fostered by care and competence. Case dismissed. Daniel froze. His lawyers looked like statues, still, pale, stunned. I stood, not fast, not triumphant, just steady. Outside, reporters were already waiting. Someone must have tipped them off. The story had been brewing for weeks. Everyone in the industry knew this case wasn't just about contracts. It was about what matters. One journalist approached me with a microphone. "Ms. Lane, how does it feel to have won?" I smiled. Not the polite, diplomatic one I used to wear in boardrooms. A real one. "It's not about winning," I said. "It's about being seen." And finally, I was. The headline the next morning? She didn't steal the clients. She earned them. Daniel's name wasn't mentioned, but I heard he offered his resignation the next day. Quietly, without ceremony, and that no one asked him to stay. I kept the folder, of course, but I don't need it anymore. Now I have a team, an assistant of my own, a title that no longer fits neatly on a business card. I speak at conferences. I'm building a mentorship program for young professionals who, like me, were once told their jobs didn't matter. And sometimes, I still sit at my desk late into the evening, look out over the city lights, and think about that day. The day I walked out with one folder, and everything that truly mattered. It had rained the morning it all changed again. Thin, silvery streaks falling down the windows of my office, like a quiet kind of poetry. I had just sat down with a mug of ginger tea when my inbox pinged. Subject: Appointment Confirmation. Director of Strategic Negotiations. I blinked at the screen for a moment. My heart stuttered, then thumped with the clarity of a bell. They had made it official. I was no longer a secretary, not just a manager, not even just the woman who saved their client base. Now, I was a director. I leaned back in my chair, letting it sink in. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I remembered. I remembered the sting of being called obsolete. I remembered Daniel's laughter as I walked out with that folder. I remembered the smallness I once wrapped myself in like a shield, because I'd been taught that being just helpful wasn't enough to matter. Now I led a department that negotiated with clients from 5 continents. My strategy team had quadrupled in size. My ideas shaped how our company approached human-centric commerce. We'd integrated empathy-based negotiation into our onboarding process. My system. Our growth? 28% in 2 quarters. Our client satisfaction? Unmatched. And all of it, because I had refused to disappear. Naturally, that's when Daniel came back, like a bad echo from a chapter I'd already closed. After losing the court case, he was officially dismissed from Corvado Partners. Quietly, no public statement, just a sterile press release that said he had moved on to pursue other opportunities. Industry insiders knew better. And so did he. He didn't take it well. He began showing up in ugly corners of the internet. Subtle posts on anonymous forums about manipulative employees and emotional weaponization in client relations. The language was always vague, but it was unmistakably about me. At first, I ignored it. But then one of my junior team members flagged an anonymous email they'd received with my name in the subject line and a warning. Do you really trust her? It rattled them, but not me, because I knew exactly who it was from. So I responded, not to him, but to my team. I called a meeting. I stood at the front of the glass-walled conference room, my name on the whiteboard, and I said the thing Daniel never understood. Transparency is power. If you hear something about me, ask me. If you're afraid, tell me. I didn't get here by pretending to be perfect. I got here by doing the work, and I'll never be afraid of the truth. My team applauded. Daniel didn't know it yet, but he'd just ensured his own permanent erasure. A week later, he emailed me directly. The address was a personal Gmail. No subject, just 5 words. You won. I hope it was worth it. I stared at it for a long time. Then I archived it. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I didn't need to say anything. I was already living the answer. And that answer was unfolding every day in the halls of my new life. In the calls I took with international partners who opened with, "It's such a relief to finally speak to you." In the late nights spent mentoring my team, not micromanaging, but encouraging, empowering. I wasn't building a hierarchy. I was building a culture. One where no one was invisible, where emotional intelligence was policy, where just a secretary would never be said again. A month into my new title, Veriton held an executive retreat. There, around a mahogany table, with people I once thought I'd never sit beside, I presented a new negotiation framework, one that combined behavioral patterns, emotional data, and intuitive listening. My folder system, digitized, refined, scalable. When I finished, there was silence. Then a standing ovation. Regina met me afterward, her glass of wine tilted in one hand, her voice low and proud. "You've rewritten the rules," she said. "You didn't just take your power back. You made it look effortless." I smiled, tired but glowing. "It wasn't effortless," I said, "but it was worth it." That night, I walked through the retreat garden alone, heels in one hand, stars overhead. The folder was long gone now, retired with care. But the knowledge inside it, the relationships, the insights, the instinct, was living in systems, people, and practices across an entire department. My department. Daniel? He had faded. No more blog posts, no more emails. I heard he applied for a consultancy role in another firm. Word got around. The court case came up. So did the testimonials. The silence from clients. He didn't get the job. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Because power isn't in punishing those who tried to break you. It's in becoming someone they can never touch again. And I had done that. No longer invisible, no longer replaceable, no longer waiting to be chosen. I had chosen myself. And from here on out, the only thing obsolete was the idea that I was ever just a secretary. My office has windows on 3 sides. It wasn't intentional. I didn't request the corner suite or the skyline view. It just happened. Like so many things in my life lately, It arrived because of who I'd become, not who I used to be. The walls are lined with quiet trophies, not plaques or medals, but things that mean something to me. A framed photo of my team at our first big client summit. A card Raphael's daughter drew for me, thanking me for helping her father be home more often. A signed copy of a business magazine with the headline, The Bridget Lane Method, Making Empathy Profitable. Everything is going well. Better than well. Our department broke a record last quarter. Highest client retention rate in Veriton's history. The training program I developed is now being piloted across 3 other companies. My negotiation framework has been adapted into a masterclass, and there are whispers of turning it into a book. I still arrive early, still make my own tea. But now I sit at the table. Now I lead the meetings. Now people turn to me, not just for answers, but for guidance. And I give it freely, because I remember what it was like to be invisible. I remember what it was like to sit in the shadow of someone who never saw me. Daniel Croft. His name hasn't come up in months. Not in meetings, not in articles, not in rumor. He's gone. His last desperate attempts to claw back relevance fizzled out quietly. No one hired him. No one returned his calls. His reputation didn't collapse with a bang. It dissolved, slowly, with the silence that follows disgrace. And yet, here's the strange truth. He taught me something, not by mentoring me, not by supporting me, but by underestimating me so thoroughly that I had no choice but to find out just how strong I really was. He taught me that titles are not the same as power, that confidence without compassion is just noise, that when people treat others like they're disposable, they end up alone. He taught me that there is nothing more dangerous than someone who quietly keeps track, not to take revenge, but to remember. I don't hate him. I don't even resent him anymore, because everything I have now, my team, my title, my peace, came not just in spite of him. It came because of what he failed to see, and what I finally saw in myself. There's a photo on my desk that no one ever asks about. It's not framed. Just a simple snapshot, slightly faded, tucked beside my keyboard. It's me, wearing a headset, sitting at my old desk at Corvado, smiling faintly, the lights hitting my face in a way that makes it look like I'm glowing. Every now and then I look at it, not to remember the pain, but to honor the girl who stayed kind even when she was ignored, who learned everything, who paid attention, who got up, walked out with one folder, and changed her life. She is still me, but I am no longer her. And that is the greatest lesson Daniel Croft ever gave me, without even knowing it.